Hi, I'm Michael Bonin. Welcome and thanks to all of you for joining us for this very special event. I met Barbara Gaffin over 50 years ago, and like many of you, I've basically known her as an internationally recognized belly dancer. But it turns out that in her spare time, she's been a key player in two major events in modern Jewish history, and tonight we're going to hear about her role in those events. During tonight's program, which will be about 45 minutes long, we'll hear remarks from a small group of Barbara's colleagues over the past 35 to 40 years, followed by a rebuttal from Barb. And finally, the Oscar for Best Performance as a Daughter goes to Tamar Gaffin-Cahn, who conducted the interviews, edited the recordings, and was the extraordinary producer of this evening's event. And now, enjoy the show.
Ethiopia ትንሣኤ ዘመን ነው ዕለቱ ስትሰሙ በረከት ወደ ምስራቅ.
Ethiopia had a very bloody revolution, and it wasn't really all that much over yet. There was a dictator, a guy named Malaku. You know, every time we said Malaku, you had to take up your grogger and, you know, swing it around because he had really suppressed the Ethiopian Jews. He was a real bad guy. Ethiopia had been closed for many years, but all of a sudden, one day, the government announced that they were going to allow tourists in. And I got the idea, why don't I collect a bunch of American Jews and go visit the Ethiopian Jews? And my boss at the LACRC said, what a great idea, Barry.
Barbara was the best person to take on that work and to do all the important things that we needed to do.
Out of the blue, I get this phone call from this crazy person in Boston who's absolutely insisting that I allow her to join the group.
You know, when she set her mind to something, she was going to pursue it.
We were on a mission to the Ethiopian Jews.
Literally after some of us had left our hometowns and were starting to gather in New York, Ethiopian government reversed itself and said we couldn't go there and they weren't going to let us in. And we had a guide who said that he was going to get us in no matter what.
And we were going to tell them, okay, then we'll go to the Semyon Mountains, which are beautiful and big.
And I guess 40 years later, I'm allowed to say that he bribed some people. We were the first foreigners to be in that part of the country since before the revolution.
I remember also that her baggage never arrived. Somewhere between Boston and New York, it got lost. And so Barbara didn't have a suitcase, and she was wearing borrowed clothes from other people on the trip, which didn't seem to bother her in the least.
Went on this donkey slash horse ride way up into the hinterlands, 2 days long to get to this Ethiopian village. And I think at one point, I'm 6'4" if I sit up straight, and Barbara is what, 5'6", or has she grown lately?
When Barbara takes on a cause, she takes on it full force.
I think Barbara carried me a portion of the trip.
We came to our final destination when we were at the top of one mountain and looked across the trip down and a dry river, and then a steep cliff up, and we were told the Jewish village is on top of that cliff.
And so we had to sleep out overnight, out in the wild, without sleeping bags or anything. And so we came to some Ethiopian village. They lit a big bonfire for us, and we all cuddled. I didn't get to cuddle with Barbara, so just everybody know that.
Then we had our long interviews with the Jews, which were wonderful. They were wonderful. And then we set out to go home again. I was scared to death most of the time. And when we finally arrived at the place where a Jeep or whatever we had was going to come and pick us up, and I got off my mule for the last time and sat on the ground and cried, because I was so grateful just that I had gotten alive here. I had been sure I'd be dead one way or another. And while I was crying, I noticed that Barbara, this beautiful young woman with red hair, she was crying. And so I went over to her and I said, "Barbara, why are you crying?" And she said, "Because it was so wonderful and it's all over now."
This is before the migration to Israel and the rescue. I'd say 99% of all American Jews never heard that there were Ethiopian Jews. And if they heard, they didn't quite believe it. So Barbara went on the speaking tour.
The trip in its full was the start of a lot of help for Ethiopian Jews.
She could almost embody the spirit.
Believing that she felt that she was part of us, and we are, as if, part of her.
Watching her present to the Jewish community or any community about the Jews of Ethiopia and being like, wow, like she's so engaging, and she didn't really sit still very much.
We went to Israel after that trip, and I think I introduced Barbara to every single Ethiopian Jew in the country, which, was up to 150 by then, or 200, or whatever it was.
And we, thank God, here in Israel, 160,000 Ethiopian Jews today.
I met with her and she connected me to a woman in New York, Barbara Ribicoff, and who was beginning an organization called the North American Conference on Ethiopian Jewry.
Her involvement was throughout. She was obviously very early. We formed the organization right after we came back from the Semien Mountains.
The Jewish community was very resistant and couldn't believe that there were actually Jews in Ethiopia. And so Barbara had to talk to communities that were very skeptical and really say, this is about saving lives. This is about getting the Jews out of a really horrific situation of famine and discrimination and anti-Semitism.
She's always been one who was ready to do whatever was needed.
There was some risk to that.
And it was very difficult in those days that the Israeli government and the Jewish agency and the other Jewish establishments were very reluctant to admit that the Ethiopian Jews are truly Jews and they can come to Israel like the other Jewish community.
I think there was personal, professional risk that she had with that, but there was also, risk for the JCRC and kind of taking on a strategy that would come in conflict with the Federation. And, she didn't let that stop us.
I also wanted someone who, wouldn't hesitate to take on the establishment and wouldn't hesitate to push back.
She was one of the pushers.
But those are exactly the situations that make Barbara Gaffin completely crazed and completely dedicated to getting the job done.
It was my theory that we needed to find external points of pressure on them, and trying to develop as allies the Jewish members of Congress. And of course, given the fact that there was a Jewish member of Congress from Massachusetts in his first term, Barney Frank, that I thought that was an interesting angle. And I reached out to find out who the foreign policy legislative assistant was. Of course, that turned out to be Doug Kahn.
I was working in Washington for Congressman Barney Frank. And from time to time, I would get a call from the Jewish Community Relations Council, and in particular, Barbara Gaffin was her name.
I met Barbara by inheriting Doug to be first my foreign policy advisor and then my chief of staff.
And she was concerned about Soviet Jewry and a number of other distressed Jewish communities around the world, and would provide us with information that would be useful to us in the Congress for making sure that some of these issues were front and center.
Barbara was a very influential force, I thought, for common sense and for blending liberalism with full support for Israel. So in addition, obviously, to the relationship with Doug, she was independently very important to me as a force for good policy in the Jewish Community Relations Council.
She came to Washington once, and she called me a couple of days ahead of time and said, "I'd like to meet with you." And she came to Barney's office. It was scheduled to be about a 15 or 20-minute meeting. And well, let's just say it went on for quite a while. And so, whether there could be or should be some US government action that we could take, I mean, it was quite an interesting set of circumstances. And I remember thinking that this was kind of a fun meeting. And I thought about that for a while. And
I saw a match there. Doug is a nice guy. Let me kind of encourage that along a little bit. And
well, let's just say the rest is history.
I'd say the project where Barbara went above and beyond was pursuing Doug.
Yeah, the rest is history.
I could not have had a good relationship with anybody, and I had a very good one with Barbara, if there wasn't a lot of laughter mutually provoked.
It was about using all levers with Jewish elected officials in power. And it was really to create a kind of a tension between the Jewish members of Congress and the Jewish establishment, where the Jewish establishment, the federations were, kind of forced to the table.
You have to either be idealistic or pragmatic. And I've always felt that if you have strong commitment to ideals, you have a moral obligation to be pragmatic. The ideals don't do any good if you don't get them implemented. And Barbara was a perfect example.
Barbara really is the ideal Jewish professional in that she worked in the Jewish community, but she really brought in the values, the best values of Judaism to her work in the Jewish community.
And she has a very big part of that Jewish history, our history.
It was an historic trip that Barbara helped us do, the first American Jews to reach the Ethiopian Jews in the hinterlands of Ethiopia after the revolution. And that's our little footnote of history.
over Washington, አንተ ማሲንቆ ስታይ ሶዳኮ እንኳን አደረሰ ለአዲስ ዘመን ዘመን ሸፈኖ ይታደር።
Дорогі українці, зазвичай у новорічному привітанні президенти розповідають нам про зростання ВВП, падіння інфляції, імплементацію, диверсифікацію та інші дуже незрозумілі терміни. Одним словом, переконують, що насправді ми почали жити краще. Просто поки що ви цього не помітили. І тому дуже часто під час звернення президента ми вимикаємо звук. Чекаємо, поки він закінчить свою казку, щоб нарешті перейти до шампанського, канапок із шпротами та олів'є. Сьогодні буде інакше. Давайте сьогодні кожен чесно відповість сам собі на важливе питання. Хто я?
We looked at each other and said, okay, so now it's over. Jews are free to leave. They can go anywhere they want. But there are Jews choosing to stay. And so, we went about this effort to figure out if there was a community we could partner with in the former Soviet Union and help rebuild Jewish life there for the first time in a century.
It's not only about helping people, it's like building institutions that serve the people.
We were matched with a community that no one could pronounce, Dnipropetrovsk. And it was at the time the fourth largest Jewish community in the former Soviet Union, but no one had ever heard of it.
We were lucky to be matched with Boston, and it was love at first sight.
And it felt like family, and it felt like a very close, strong connection.
It wasn't an accident that none of us had ever heard of it. Dnipropetrovsk was, I came to understand later, what was called a closed city.
We didn't speak Ukrainian or Russian, and not many of them spoke English.
The chances that this should work were not so big.
The whole thing was impossible and improbable.
You need an engine to make it happen.
Barbara was building something from absolute scratch. This was all on Barbara.
And we were working together to solve very real and tough problems.
We are having a very hard time financially, and we are not able to pay salaries. We are not able to feed people. She was taking it so much to heart.
Barbara's role was to help not only the Bostonians, but the Ukrainian Jewish community and get them to fit together.
And she was asking the community in Boston to help us and save the situation. She knew who to speak to, how to get people excited. But for us, it was life-saving.
She was not fazed by challenges in her life, in the world, and she was able to balance it all. And of course, would run every morning while she was there.
Barbara Gaffin is a force of nature.
But she was in charge, and wonderful as long as we did it her way. And so we did, because none of us were stupid.
It was the kind of commitment that would have made Moshe Rabbeinu stand up and take a look and try to figure out what was going on.
It was exactly that energy that made the thing happen. Somehow or other, she was able to garner volunteer support and bring in amazing, amazing people. And these people literally saved lives. They built institutions. They educated generations of doctors, volunteers. But it wasn't just that. It was creating a relationship with Rabbi Kamenetsky and with all those people and with their energy and making amazing things happen.
And trying to get things done, getting them done, insisting that they have to be done, required an iron will in Barbara that the only rival to that will I can think of was Joseph Stalin.
She and I kind of would fight because she wouldn't look. We didn't have time for lunch. We didn't have time to sit down. We didn't have time. And I'd say, Barb, can't you give us a little time? And she'd say, no, we have to do all this.
every person there, you know, from Rabbi Kamenetsky on down, all the directors, they knew that she was special.
You know, you take a Ukrainian Gentile person and me, the rabbi, it's when she's an American woman, you know, she was able to do more than I did sometimes. Yeah.
Barbara never let diplomacy interfere with honesty.
The Shabbos table, everybody thinks about my Shabbat table, but when she comes, it's a most entertaining Shabbos table.
Barbara and Shmuel are on different ends of the political spectrum by about as far as you can get. And she made a sport out of baiting him.
It was a revelation that Barbara was a vegetarian.
Shmuel thinks animals were put on earth for us to eat them. And so they would bait each other for hours at a time. They could have sold tickets to it.
My family is always waiting for her.
It was important to have fun because the work was serious.
The president of Ukraine, when he saw her in New York, they didn't stop laughing in the few moments when they stood next to each other. You know, he's a professional comedian, funny person. She's also, and their height is the same, you know, so they were very connecting and they started laughing just.
So in conjunction with the clinic, we were making a whole big thing out of this. And at one moment, they put Barbara and me in medical coats and had us on television explaining about this women's clinic. Now, what I know about medicine is how to put on a Band-Aid. And Barbara, I don't think, knew a whole lot more. And so we started talking about, so Dr. Gaffin, how do you find the clinics? She went, oh, Dr. Ribicoff. And we got into this whole dialogue of complete nonsense live on Dnipropetrovsk TV.
One trip got so fouled up getting there because of delays in Kiev that we were going to arrive on Shabbos. And that's the sort of thing that I had supposed would shake the nerves of most people trying to get this thing going. And just watching Barbara in action, she wasted zero time on being anxious. And in fact, zero time on explaining to us what she was doing, which was always one of her marvelous qualities. She just did it instead of explaining it. And off she went to go harangue, ultimately, the president of some airline to explain to them that he better get this solved in the next 5 minutes. By the way, of course, he wasn't English speaking, or else.
So on one trip, Barbara had a broken leg.
Traveling there with crutches is an act of courage.
And of course, we were all invited to the rabbi's home for Shabbat dinner Friday evening after service.
Was up a bunch of hills. It wasn't exactly close. And we were assigned a group of Bacharim, you know, yeshiva boys, to escort us and help us with the thing. And they were like horrified because, well, you can't push a wheelchair on Shabbat, you know, God forbid. And Rabbi Kamenetsky said, you're pushing Barbara's wheelchair.
So in the morning, David Linker and Barbara and I used to run along the equivalent of the Bund along the side of the river Dnipro. And often we were chased by local dogs who we were convinced were either Cossacks or Nazis who'd smelled Jewish blood running along the side of the river.
We were invited to a prom because we happened to be there in September on Dnipro Day. And so we thought, okay, that sounds like something we ought to show up at. There were 4 of us and we were dressed in, you know, whatever we had worn for traveling around that day. And our jaws just dropped because the people there were dressed like they were at a Cinderella ball.
The Ukrainians, they like to drink from morning to evening.
So we went, the first day we went to the women's health clinic. They pass around a tray of vodka. Okay, vodka. Now it's 8:30, 8:45 in the morning. Drink one. Okay, get another one. Drink 2 shots of vodka at 8:45. We go off to the day school. It's 9:15. End of it, they take us in a little room, and the same thing happens. Speech, 2 more shots. So it's now like at the outside, 9:30, 9:40, something like that. We've had 4 shots of vodka.
But those early days were an adventure. In the days when we went to the hotel Dnipropetrovsk, which had an interesting clientele of ladies in the lobby and Soviet apparatchiks on every floor.
It was a Soviet-style hotel. And when a new hotel was built, Barbara and I were the only ones who really didn't want to move to the new hotel because it didn't fit the work we were doing there. We were working with an impoverished Jewish community, and we didn't feel that we should stay, especially Barbara, in a 5-star hotel as opposed to a modest, old-style hotel.
She would do things for people that was not always popular.
So she was my first boss. After we met first time, I did not expect it. They saw not big size lady, the very miniature. They will be my boss.
We became much more pluralistic thanks to her. You know, looking at things in a much different way. And it came through stories of people. If she would continue, I would become a Reform rabbi. You know, she knew when to stop. She was. I didn't make her a Chabad Rebbetzin, but she's making me a Reform liberal person.
For me, not like my boss, like my friends, and later like my sister, like we in one family.
Barbara cares very, very much, but I don't think she takes things seriously, which shouldn't be taken seriously.
She was always making sure that all the people she traveled with were comfortable in what was, for a lot of us, a very new setting.
We were busy, very busy.
But there are always organizations that wanted to see us.
Yeah.
And
she booked us.
When she decides that she needs to do something for someone, she doesn't care about if she might even lose her job because of it.
I mean, she would take care of business. She would take care of what needed to be done. She would check in on me. And, you know, if I said something, she took it very seriously. She never just brushed it off.
They say to this day that they have a thriving, incredible community that no longer is at all dependent on Boston. But we gave them, I think, the courage and the fortitude and the support and the partnership to be able to build a Jewish day school and able to build, micro enterprise programs for women and a Big Brother program and a special needs program with disabled. Everything we were doing in Boston.
From being a 20,000 people community, we became a 60,000 people community because everybody is welcomed and accepted.
And the result was amazing. It did just what we wanted it to do, which was a fantastic, interesting, cultured Jewish life. And we helped to make that possible, but it was their strength and endurance that made it work. And it was the strength and endurance of Barbara Gaffin that made the whole thing happen.
I'm so verklempt. Seriously, I am delighted that I can finally stop taking my anti-FOMO pills. I never liked the idea of missing my own funeral. But there are lots of you I'd like to thank tonight, and I promise to keep it under 2 hours. First, the committee. Michael, Betsy, Nami, Elise, and what's her name? Oh yes, Tamar, what a labor of love. My cup runneth over with appreciation and gratitude to you and, of course, the rest of my family. Those of you who participated, I hope you did not feel compelled to say something nice. If you did, it's okay to write me an email telling me what you really think. And those of you who took the time to watch. Some of us force our friends to look at pictures of their grandchildren. Others make our friends watch videos of tributes. Thanks for being good sports. And enough cannot be said about those who played and continue to play a role in these two projects. Whether you were in the trenches or a visionary, a financial supporter or an advocate, we all share a sense of responsibility to Klal Yisrael. And you know this is not a one-night stand. Our commitment remains firm and has evolved to meet the changing needs of Ethiopian Jews and the Jewish community of Dnipro. We once dedicated ourselves to helping Ethiopian Jews get to Israel. Today, we turn our efforts to ending discrimination in Israel. In Dnipro, we once dedicated ourselves to helping Jews revive their lost community. Today, that community is vibrant and the relationship strong. At the core of our work, we are inspired and led by those who believe in themselves and too often risk their lives for the spiritual and sometimes physical survival of the Jewish people. Ethiopian Jews who suffered trauma, whether it was in Ethiopia, Sudan, or today in Israel. Jews in Ukraine who not very long ago faced significant anti-Semitism and today have a Jewish president. May we go from strength to strength as we nourish Klal Yisrael and communities beyond our own. Thank you all very much.
Over Washington, answer my single, so that go.